imagine
A podcast.
where time drifts slowly.
A podcast.
Where
Isaac
carries you away.
So let me be clear. We tortured some folks.
Hey, hi, hello, it's Isaac. You're listening to Coexist Inc. On today's episode, I'm joined by returning guest, Exit North. He was my buddy that back in January reported on what was happening in Minnesota with all the ICE raids after the murder of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and how they organized to basically thwart ICE's efforts to destabilize the city of Minneapolis. He comes back on the show to tell us that the fight is not over, even though it's not getting as much media coverage as it once was. 15 people were arrested for being involved in protests vaguely in Minnesota. And so we talk about that. We talk about the efforts of the Trump administration to demonize anybody as a terrorist if you show any sort of sympathy towards migrants in this country. And I love this conversation with Exit North because I'm very frustrated with the way a lot of leftists today talk about politics. They seem hyper-focused on electoral politics and how displeased they are with them, as we all are. So here's an alternative. Here is a way to rightfully complain about the constant disappointment that is liberal, left-adjacent electoralism. Here is a way to at least provide an alternative when you are complaining about the way that El Sayed or AOC or Plattner or whomever might disappoint you in the near future once they are in office. Because I think we can all agree it's not going to, electing whomever, it's not going to give us the revolution that we so desire. And so I think that here we can do something else. And I think that Minneapolis is a great example of how you can resist, I hate saying the F word, but fascism effectively. So I'm also going to put some links in the bio to organizations you can support. Because one of the interesting things I learned talking to Exit is that this affected, the ICE raids affected local business in Minneapolis terribly. Lots of places had to close down. It cost a lot of money. It cost them taxpayer dollars. And of course, the federal government did nothing to reimburse them for terrorizing the city for months. I also want to do a little bit of announcing. Remember, August 25th is the next book club where we will read God Forgives, Brothers Don't, and the author, Jasper Craven, will join us to talk about his book. We'll talk about electoralism and whether we should ever elect Marines to office. I would also like to invite you all on my Haunted 9/11 tour of Sarasota in the very near future. So if you'd like to be a part of that tour in any capacity, please subscribe to the Patreon. And if you can't subscribe to the Patreon, like, share, do all the algorithm things you know I hate asking you to do. But it makes a big difference. And so if you feel a little bit of pang of guilt for listening to me for free, which I love that you do. I'm very, again, it's incredible that people listen to me at all, but I do have bills to pay. I do have a trolley to rent for the Haunted 9/11 tour. So if you are capable, of course, I know that there are bills to pay, but if you are capable, please subscribe on either Patreon or Substack. And as always, enjoy the show. Man, I'm glad to see that you're not in prison. That's great. That's great news.
Yeah. I mean, we're holding our breath, I guess. It got obviously a little bit of a scare for a few people, but it is the indictment. It does feel like it is spaghetti at the wall. I think they're legally.
Which indictment are you talking about in particular?
Oh, I'm sorry. The Minnesota 15, particularly the 15 folks that were in this 93-page indictment, and
federal indictment, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And,
well, let's start from the beginning. Let's give the listeners a little bit of a debrief here, because
Sure.
last we spoke, it was right after ICE had descended on Minnesota and Minneapolis. Renee Good was just murdered. Did we talk? I think we talked before Alex Preddy got killed, right?
I was trying to look that up myself today. I don't actually remember the day that we talked.
I think it was like pretty immediately after Renee Good was murdered. I can't remember if it was before or after Alex Preddy got shot, but it was an interesting time to talk. And it was at that moment, it did seem like Minneapolis had shown the country how to successfully thwart the fascist thuggery of the Trump administration. And to me, it was a nice crack of light through the darkness. That's like, oh, like there are people organizing. There is a way to stop this. There is a way to stymie it. And then the news moved on to something else, right? I mean, it was the winter turned into spring, and now the spring is into summer, and there wasn't that much action going on a national news level, at least that I can recall in Minnesota. But then now we have Trump and his ice brown shirts descending back on Minneapolis and arresting people who had even like sort of adjacently participated in the initial ICE protests. Is that a fair assessment since we last spoke?
Yeah, I think that's and that's
Do you
sums
want to
it
fill
up
in any
well.
gaps as well?
I think there, in terms of, there was a decrease in ICE activity, but not even within the last like 2 months. There's still people who are being like pulled from their cars, like windows smashed, a seatbelt cut. And so you're absolutely right about not national level news. And we definitely have seen a decrease in general activity, but the all of a sudden having that the indictment that came out of nowhere, it seems like, uh, and it seemed to kind of co-inspire, like, or like kind of happen right around the same time as like some of the prairie land stuff was happening as well. It kind of seemed like when that stuff was sort of coming into the news cycle that this became a thing as well here in Minnesota.
Prior to those viral arrests of protesters, it was relatively quiet. I mean, ICE was still around, but not really in any meaningful way. Or what was it like? I mean, did it feel like a victory initially after the winter and Trump fired? It was Kristi Noem, right? And then
Yeah.
so I mean, you guys kind of were responsible for Kristi Noem's firing, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some folks would like to take credit for that, I guess, and then that there's definitely put pressure on them. And she was just, as people become, they're like a political cannon fodder. They just get
Mm-hmm.
thrown into these positions and told what to do and say and stuff. Um, but I think that in terms of the victory, like, sure, I think that there was definitely some. Uh, it didn't really, I guess, to some degree, I guess, no, like, because it didn't really feel like there were things that tangibly were changing. Like, it kind of just felt like, okay, we're in it's a pause, we're at like halftime or something. And I personally expect things to get really bad again um during the election season, like, like right around the election time. Trump just said the other day that they're going to deploy, or maybe it was Tom Holman or Horman or whatever, but one of the two said that they're going to be deploying people to 7 states or something like that, for patrolling the polls or whatever kind of veiled threat that was. So no, I mean, I think that there was some victories in turning of like, look at what we can do together as a big community. And when people kind of really have that singular bonding thing to like really bring you together, it is remarkable how much community you do feel. But then as things kind of like ease down around here, I feel like a lot of people were very disappointed in our local government about how they kind of chose to respond. And kind of there's been a lot of controversy in our city council about emergency funds and emergency like rent relief and stuff like that. And just the places in which that the budget is being pulled from for some of these things, and everything is very highly political. And so I think visibly it probably does feel like somewhat of a victory at first, but the reality sets in quickly, you know.
In other words, the local organizing was successful, but when you zoom out, the local governance, the elected officials, the institutions didn't take this and help out. And in other words, they just weren't there and they didn't do anything about it after the fact.
Absolutely. And, you know, like the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, which basically became the security guards for ICE, which is like another big issue of, so Minneapolis, in not St. Paul's in Ramsey County, but Whipple building is kind of right where Minneapolis and St. Paul come together, but it's technically in Minneapolis. And Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, whereas the people who are deployed essentially to be, they're the people who erected all the cement barricades. They were kind of like doing some of the arrests for people they were doing a lot of bogus arrests themselves. And so locally, like you're looking at that's happening to us. And then when you go to the city council and or like, you know, county budget meetings that, you know, we became very interested in. I mean, a lot of people have always been interested in it, but I think more people are being civically curious, or like curious about like where civically, it's not the right word, but like curious where your tax dollars are going, you know, kind of that thing. Like what is the amount of money that our tax rates keep going up? So what's happening with it? And we're looking at these overtime, like like some of the departments blew their entire year's budget in January. So it's like, you know, and like all these, you know, munitions and, you know, pallets and pallets and pallets of tear gas and like all this stuff. And, you know, some of it used, some of it not used or whatever. But like, it's just kind of insane where you're like looking at this and you're like, the people that make this city so awesome, which is, you know, all of us, but like the folks that are living paycheck to paycheck they only have that much money for the rent on their restaurant, and they have like, you know, great food, you know, that they're offering to the city about our cultural fabric. And then our city leaders that, you know, constituents are just getting completely screwed over by these people, you know. It's really a bummer.
So, in other words, all of the ruckus caused by ICE obviously hurt local businesses, and now they're having a hard time recovering from it.
Yeah, I think I might be misquoting this, but there was $40 million of revenue lost on Lake Street alone. Lake Street in Minneapolis is a pretty long road that has a lot of food and entertainment and stuff like that goes up and down. It goes all kind of cuts through the city horizontally. And I think it was like between like 60 or 90 days, it was like $40 million in revenue off on that street alone in Minneapolis.
And the local officials have done nothing to either help these local businesses out. And you were saying that they spent a lot of the local tax dollars to aid ICE.
Yes, absolutely. So like the Minneapolis Police Department and Hennepin County Sheriff's Department were being unnecessarily and overly deployed to monitor these situations. And quite honestly, if you look at videos from back at that point in time, the cops are just kind of just sitting there. They weren't even really they weren't doing anything, but they were, you know, so this money is being spent disproportionately on this, which it's like ICE, it basically has their own security to get in and outside of Whipple and or to break up any sort of organizing and discontent, you know, from the city or from the citizens.
That's
So
it's interesting. That's something I hadn't really considered was I mean, obviously there's like what was it, $82 billion allotted to ICE in the latest budget. Uh, but at the same
yeah,
time,
it's
like
north of
local,
100 total, but it's like
yeah,
140 billion total or something like that.
and yet still local cities, the cities have to pay for ICE coming to their
Yes.
towns. Like the
Yes.
I know that they're like staying in like hotels and shit like that, but I don't think that's really helping the local economy at all. ICE's presence.
No, not at all. And it's like the I think, we're like everybody loses out on that. And then, I think as always, similar to like, it doesn't matter who it is, but like similar to my thoughts about like the people in Gaza, it's like just these children, that are just being like used as like, there was this controversy about this child being used by ICE here in Minnesota as like bait essentially to get, and in exchange for the father to give himself up. And and how much it's just creating crisis, like it's creating a crisis, a social crisis,
Right.
on minute, like on micro scales of just like these nuclear families being ripped apart, and what it's doing to like our school systems, and like especially like Spanish immersion schools, and like in a lot, some of those, depending upon where they are in the Twin Cities, like there's a lot of white kids that go to those schools, but then all the educators are not white. And so it's like there's like there that it's even impacting people like that live in more well-to-do parts of the city that
Yeah, and
have these immersion programs.
I mean, it's just like the gas crisis in America, where people only pay attention or only notice things when it's hurting their own wallet, and so Americans complain when they're hurting at the pump. But it's just like kids are dying, and
Yes.
that's not going to bother you. So yeah, maybe that's just what it takes is a sort of like trickle up effect of misery, and finally wealthy people will start to realize how integrated all of these people are into our everyday life, and then they'll care. Maybe have there been any consequences? Have any heads rolled as a consequence after ICE came through? I mean, like local businesses who either didn't help or who aided and abetted ICE. Were there any consequences or people like that?
There were definitely consequences in terms of just like canceled on social media, I guess, and having their businesses being impacted by that, people being exposed for, being pro ICE, and kind of things that you see happen all around the country, like, when some controversy happens. I wouldn't, honestly, not really. Though, like I don't think like there's one business I can think of, and just to like not get anybody in trouble, I'm not going to name any names to create some witch hunt, but there's one place that has they're like a chain here locally, and like I think maybe one store closed that was like kind of in the heart of kind of where some of the action was. But no, there's actually a cool story though, in kind of like a positive way, about there's this restaurant called Modern Times in South Minneapolis, and they changed their business entirely to pay what you can. And they're actually doing better than they were when they had prices on the menu.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so that's what I would like to some more of before we get into what is on the horizon here.
Sure.
Some more feel good stories. I mean, I remember leaving our conversation, I think it was back in January or like early
January.
February,
Yeah.
leaving our conversation feeling like hopeful, being like, oh, here are people showing us how it's done, right? I've been trying to read a lot of revolutionary literature to figure out like what applies today, and we're only going to know as we experiment with it. And so I think that seeing people do direct action, right, and not just post online, about how right they were about some corrupt politician or some conspiracy. I like seeing people doing stuff uh, in the wake of that winter crisis. What did you guys learn?
Well, one thing I can say for certain is that no, like even your local and state government are more posed against you than they're ever gonna come across like on TV or the radio or something. Um, it's there is the diminishing returns of mutual aid is a very real thing. And like I think that there people have figured out ways to kind of step in and step out of their financial commitments to make sure that they can keep doing it for a long term. I think that a lot of people um threw themselves into this movement, and now we have all of these channels of communication that will exist in case if anything does pop off again. Like all of that planning is something that is now ingrained into the cultural infrastructure. And so that's something that I tell that to people a lot when people, because the fervence and that real, like I'm on the streets every day energy has absolutely waned because the enemy is invisible as much. And so when the enemy is visible, then you have a place to be, you have somewhere to go, you have a sign to hold up, to yell at somebody, whatever, right? A whistle to blow. But when the things become a little bit more covert and the raids and operations aren't as visible, people who are a little bit newer to more revolutionary things or being kind of boots on the ground kind of people, um, they are like, oh my God, like everybody, nobody cares anymore. Nobody's connected. Nobody's in it. Like we're going to fail. There's this like really defeatist attitude sometimes about that. But something to always remind people is that, especially here in the Twin Cities, is like, we built something that is going to be there forever. Because some of these chats were existing from the George Floyd uprising, and they just expanded, and then there's much new, a lot of new stuff there too. And again, Isaac, I'm sorry, I'm always such a long-winded person.
No. Makes my job easier.
Um, and other things that we've learned is that, like, you know, um, being an idiot online is also like really fucking stupid. And you can see Kyle Wagner as a perfect example of how not to be a revolutionary. Like,
What did he do?
so Kyle Wagner is the person who's like the I'm Antifa shirt guy who got arrested. He has like tattoos on his face. He has had this following on Instagram that kind of blew up during the uprising, and he had like, went from like 5,000 followers to like 45,000 followers or something crazy in like a very short amount of time. And he's kind of this like big poster boy arrest that they did this very dramatic raid in South Minneapolis. And this guy, while I do share, some of the sentiments that he was talking about, or just generally kind of like, understand his perspective. I'm not saying I agree with what he's saying all the time, but he was just too public about it. And he was just like saying really crazy inflammatory shit. And this indictment of the Minnesota 15, like the first like 27 pages of the actual content is just like dumb shit that Kyle said online.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it's like not I'm not kidding. Like, I
Oh,
just
man.
actually reread it to before this because I wanted to make sure I don't like fumbling around with like facts and stuff like that. So I read like 70 of the 93 pages again today. And it is kind of funny because it's like there's like a couple people who were kind of posting spicy online, Kyle being really egregious in that effort. And then everything else in the indictment is just like things that you would see in the way that people talk on like the Citizen app or Nextdoor or whatever. Are you familiar with those apps or those like community channels?
Next door I am because
Yeah.
I
So
love
like
watching
Citizen
Gossipy
and
Neighbors.
Nextdoor are like the same thing pretty much. They're like just apps. And it's like, people are like, hey, what truck is parked out on my street? I don't know this truck. Like it has Texas plates. Like there's just like when you read it, it's kind of you realize that they're just trying to make people's lives miserable, and they made at least they made people have to go back to the drawing board a little bit in terms of like how we're choosing to organize or going forward. And that's no particular people, because like clearly we were that it was infiltrated, based
Yeah.
on what was in here. So
No, that part's very tough. I do wonder in the future how to organize these decentralized chats where people aren't meeting in person. It's harder to vet someone on the internet than in real life, obviously.
yeah,
Um, so I wonder how moving forward that's going to work. But then also with a character like Kyle Wagner, uh, I think that anyone who becomes a online celebrity in any activist movement should be either distrusted or they shouldn't be able to speak on behalf of everyone. And obviously that's what they've become. Like when I just look at that picture of him, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember watching all these conservative Twitter accounts posting him, Fox News, obviously, because he looks like what the conservatives want Antifa to look like, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's like he's like a
It's,
caricature of it.
yeah, exactly. And so I do wonder in a political movement, how can you have leaders like that almost need to be decentralized? And almost, I'm also thinking like on social media, activism needs to be decentralized. It needs to be anonymous. I'm sure you've seen all those videos. They're mostly coming out of England, I think, of these guys who are just like chopping down flock cameras.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
It's awesome. It's
So
so
sick.
awesome.
So sick.
Uh, I love those guys, and I know this is not they're not activists, but have you heard of like the Scrap Gang? Like they're mostly in like Ukraine and Russia, and they're these guys that just like they're total thugs, but their social media is amazing, and it does kind of have like a revolutionary spirit to it. But they just go into buildings and steal metal, like they're just stealing shit. There's like stripping like buildings that aren't even like abandoned. It's so
That's
cool.
awesome. That's pretty sick.
It's very cool stuff, and yeah, like they're gonna get caught probably. But what I
Sure.
like about it is that it's a gang. Like there isn't like a particular person who's the face of the movement. And I think that moving forward in social media, on the left, that's going to be the way is like a collective like an anonymity that I'm basically just coming up with anonymous all over again, which didn't really work, obviously, but you
Yeah.
know,
I
but
mean,
something like that.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I it's it will only work that way because everything is so incredibly monitored anyway, that
Hmm.
like you don't stand a chance, um because like it's like if you're trying to do things that are maybe a little bit more spicy, or like more like actual overt resistance or whatever, like you're you have to kind of it has to be like small amoebic groups that have no leader, and you collaboratively work on something, and sometimes people have ideas and stuff, but like there's the move, like any movement like this is going to have like the top level stuff, like people 75,000 people showing up on that Friday that was really cold here in Minnesota. And that's really cool, and that's like the visibility that you need to like normalize kind of like the movement of pushing for change and one thing. But like everybody knows that, like, well, everybody knows is not the right way to say this, but liberals are just very opposed to just doing anything. Like just like neoliberal shit is just so like still believing in our city council to do the right thing when you're watching them do what they do, and they're still like, well, my rep is a good person or whatever. It's like, no, they're not. Like, if they're voting for the Israeli drones to be put into North Minneapolis, we just voted down Skydo, a Skydo contract, which is like Israeli police drones. and they were going to use that as first responders. And in North Minneapolis, historically speaking, is like the highest concentration of like where Black folks live in Minneapolis, and has very demonized in the media and stuff like that. And like I have like it's getting gentrified as hell right now. Like I know a bunch of white folks that are buying homes over there right now. So it's like it's a nice place to live, but it gets demonized, and they were gonna change the first responders to being Skydo drones. And it's like, what the hell? And people who are like from that vote, like that ward, I believe it's Ward 4, they're voting to have the drones come. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh, like the people or like the councilman?
The council member.
Okay, the council.
You
the
know,
council.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
like, and that's where this person lives. Like, and I'm just like, what are you doing?
Here locally, in the county just to the east of me, the commissioners voted to allow what would hypothetically be the largest data center in the country, possibly the world. And when people went and they showed up and they did their civic duty and they spoke out, and everybody was against it, obviously. It's massively unpopular, but they all voted for it anyway. And so I do wonder, I mean, my hope is that, like, are people going to stop being such institution respecters at some point? I think about this too with how Trump is preemptively pardoning himself and his family and his business associates. And it's just like, oh, are you going to follow that rule because you love the institution so much? You're going to be like, well, he pardoned. It's a pardon. Can't do anything about it. Sorry. It's just like, all right. Okay. So getting back to Minneapolis and these recent arrests, that came out of nowhere. Like you said, it was much more covert now. And are they in jail, or do they get bonded out, or what's going on?
Everybody was freed within the first 24 hours, I think, of the initial arrests. The conditions of their release and stuff like that is something I'm like, the case is a little different, I think. But they're out. They're like, they were pushing for having like ankle monitors and crazy stuff, but that got shot down. So they're all out, but one person had to wait like the next day because like they didn't have enough time to process the documentation, so they just did like an overnighter in jail. But then they got out in the morning.
What kind of punishment are they facing?
I should have looked that up for sure. It's like it's prison time. And I think that it's like a range, I think that some people are looking at more than others. Like Kyle Wagner is going to be charged much heavier, I think, than other people because he was foolish enough to essentially make violent claims.
It'll be great for his brand. That'll be good for him in the long run.
Yeah. So, but I think, anywhere from 3, 5, 10, 15, like if this actually goes through, it's really interesting. And I'm sorry that I don't have that statistic in front of me, but, it was really interesting because the press conference that happened like the same day that they got arrested, they kept on alluding to like, well, these groups are responsible for the violence, and they kept on showing photos of Kyle and like in videos of Kyle, and they were using that. They're constantly using Kyle. But then there's all these other people that are involved in all these other groups and group chats that like me and my friends are all a part of and stuff. And then reporters were like, well, if you're saying that there's violence, like, why don't you just like show us like a screenshot of like, what are you talking about? Where is there injuries? Where is there medical reports? Are there like, they just kept on trying to drill that down and then they just didn't answer it. So it's like, they don't really have a lot of firepower behind whatever they're trying to instill.
Yeah. I feel that way about at least some of the prairie land cases as well. I think that they're going to get reduced. Although the one guy who's being charged with the attempted murder, I don't have much hope for him. But the guy who got 30 years from moving those zines, likely will get resentenced. But at the same time, I think this is the Trump administration trying to see what they can get away with, right? They're like you said, they're throwing a noodle at the wall and seeing if it sticks. And it'll be interesting to see what exactly they can get away with.
Absolutely.
So now looking past these arrests, down the line a little bit, because you said like
Mhm.
you're expecting a lot more shit to happen around election time. Uh, what are I don't want you to give anything away, just in case somebody's listening. But do you feel more prepared for what's coming now that you guys have had experience, or do you think they're going to adapt to your tactics? And what are you hopeful that you guys are going to figure it out?
I think
Do
it's
you feel
gonna
prepared,
be.
I guess is what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm don't know exactly what's coming, but I think I'm more prepared for it, if that makes sense. Um I know for certain that there's going to be a lot of boots on the ground, face to face confrontation. A lot of I at least I'm almost certain of that, and I expect the administration is going to do everything they can to try to get things to happen near the election, like poll lines, like somewhere near voting stations is going to happen where they're trying to provoke a response where like they shove and pepper spray, somebody who they might know to be not, whatever, or being able to like shut down your political voice because there's a lot of sensitivity around voting places, obviously, and what you can and can't do, and what you can't like in the threaten and intimidate people. Well, it's like, well, what is ICE doing? Obviously, they're threatening, intimidating people, but they're going to try to do something where like somebody's going to swing on an ICE officer, and then they're going to be like, see, you know, that's something like that is what I think that they're aiming for. So I expect people to be arrested and forcibly removed from polling stations is what I think is going to happen.
Can you vote by mail in Minnesota?
Yeah, I guess you can. Yeah, but that it's also kind of becoming a little bit of a tinfoil hat moment there too. Like, are ballots going to be manipulated, or are they going to like not count them because ICE is going to say something? I don't know. It's hard to say.
I know it's it's very fraught. Well, let's end on a happier note though. Something positive here, like uh, on the horizon that you see. Like what makes you hopeful for the near and far future?
Music usually is the thing that keeps me going forward in this life. Um, but I think that there is hope when you can see that there's a common struggle, and when people are more focused on by bonding together, coming together to overcome that struggle. That we will like people will be kind of forced to figure it out, and as more data centers are built and more forest fires are going to plague some of the most beautiful parts of North America. And, here at home right now, our air quality is like messed up because we have forest fires in northern Minnesota. And as we have less drinking water and as more schools close and everybody keeps on getting squished more and more by authoritarian powers, we will come together to figure it out. I hope that I think a lot about what's too late, climate crisis too late. We've failed the Palestinian people. It breaks my heart every day. I can't get over it. And so it's like, when is it too late? What's too late for Palestinians at this point? I mean, there's still people alive, but we failed. And so it's like, you kind of depends upon what your perspective is of when is too late.
Yeah, and I always think of it. I still have hope. I mean, I still think that the Palestinian resolve is unique in this universe, and that they will persevere in the long run. But also that I don't like not you don't do this, but a lot of other people are guilty of it. Sometimes I'm guilty of it, of a kind of doomerism, right?
Sure.
And I think that uh, they they are martyrs. They call themselves martyrs for a reason, and that means that they're dying for something larger than themselves. And so, who am I to be hopeless when they're the ones
Sure.
dying? You know,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that the memory of their martyrdom lives on in one form or another. But yeah, anyway, I really appreciate what you're doing. I mean, you're there. In certain ways, I'm very envious that I'm not there. I'm here in Florida, which is like, what the fuck am I gonna do here, dude? Like, we
Yeah.
don't
Shoot
have
an
any
alligator
apparatus.
about it or something. I don't know.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. It's we'll see. We'll see. I'm biding my time, you know? I'm biding my time. I'm an ambush predator is maybe. I don't know. But in the meantime, what can people do outside of Minnesota who want to aid what is coming? And like you said, like local businesses are suffering. Like money is necessary in these fights. Like you need like Scott Bessent said recently, you can't have. I think you can't have terrorism without money.
Yeah.
So, how can people help the cause?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. You personally getting, if there are people who need immigration lawyer help or whatever, there's like a lot of resources for like Immigrant Law Center, which is like a nationwide thing. Um, the other things that you can do, I think, is like, you know, donating food and other things like that to things that, like, that it's going to have like a tangible effect on people around you. um I think in terms of like trying to preemptively do it, I think before people look deeply into what is going on in your neighborhood or your city before you begin your own, like, I'm going to start like my own food shelf, or I'm going to do something like that. The fragmenting of those institutions is sometimes actually kind of hurtful to causes. So trying to find where you fit best too is something I think a lot of folks, when they try to step into a thing like this, they're like, I need to do it all. I need to be big. I need to be a leader.
Right.
And a lot of us just need to, like, it is noble to be a common person when the common person is fighting for the right thing. So
I love
wherever
that.
you
I
fit
love that.
best.
That's great. Well, thank you again. Keep up the good work, and we'll check back in. Hopefully, not too soon. I don't want you guys to be in the news quite yet, but
Yeah.
whenever things start getting interesting again, I'll have you back on.
Yeah, that sounds good. Take care.
All right, brother. Thank you.
See ya.